forecasting.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Today is November 16th, Monday. This is the Community Advisory Committee meeting for East Bay Community Energy. Can we have, please, a roll call?
Sure. Member Landry.
Present.
Pacheco.
Present.
Padilla.
Present.
Vice Chair Frank.
Present.
Chair Sutter. Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. And as typical, this item is reserved for anyone who wants to address us on EBC related matters that aren't otherwise on our agenda today. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, I have Kelly Abner and oops, sorry. Pete Wawode and Margie Lewis.
Great. So we'll go.
Please raise your hand.
Pete, or no, I'm
And
sorry,
Blair Beaton
Kelly.
as well.
Kelly, you should be unmuted at this point.
No, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. It seems like EBC is working mostly on the consumer end and not doing much on the supply side. It's does direct marketing, account management, glittering naming schemes, consumer polls, a lot of marketing stuff. There's less emphasis on securing clean energy at low cost and on grid stability. Even though the same politicians who are on the EBC board who created EBC and are also they are also have responsibility for land use in cities and counties. The latest solar policy by Alameda County is not geared for clean energy. They are listening to ranchers, biologists, newspaper publishers, not to electrical engineers or utility grid operators. Though EBC recognizes the high cost of rooftop solar, local leaders imagine that it's low cost. They also imagine that the price of pasta, rice, and beans ought to be on par with caviar and filet mignon. Rooftop is a Looney Tune proposition. EBCE has a strategic plan for solar combined with battery storage. But the latest county plan for solar doesn't include storage. So EBCE needs to take the lead. It needs to align land use policy with clean energy. It needs to work with cities and counties to support battery storage projects like the Aramis one on Manning Road. Finally, EBCE needs more say in state policy to price in grid stabilization as a service and incentivize frequency regulation with instantaneous response. That means more government relations specialists and more lobbyists in Sacramento. The East Bay has lots of technical expertise. Fremont is building a battery factory right next to the Tesla plant. So EBCE has the opportunity to lead the state and lead the nation in installing low carbon power combined with storage for grid stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. If you're not planning to, I would encourage you to perhaps also make comments directly to the board on Wednesday. They have a 5 p.m. start on Wednesday. So who is next, Stephanie?
Blair Beekman, and I'm sorry, Margie Lewis, Board of Directors, so she will not be at this meeting.
Okay.
Blair Beekman is next. Blair?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your meeting tonight. Happy November. I guess I just wanted to be able to note, we're headed toward our plans for the next year. I just wanted to use this time to just remind that, I'm learning how to, speak the language that, I hope we can learn how to distance ourselves from nuclear. And it takes a lot of effort from all of us. And we've made some early, overtures, what we want to start working on and it takes a real commitment to really work on it now. And I'm learning that, we're pretty heavily seriously financed by nuclear at this point. And it's a matter of how do we begin to take those steps to step away from it, from the financing element. And I'm interested to learn what that process will be. And and I think that's a way to really address, more than just saying, we're at the end of Diablo Canyon and or wherever the California nuclear plant is, the one remaining plant. What is our schedule into 2023 and beyond? I hope that can start to be a more open subject to talk about, and we really address that and don't let it slide. If we keep up, a fair amount of just conversation and good pressure about the subject, I think that'll help a lot. And so that's what I'm doing here at Public Comment today. So thanks for your meeting tonight, and thanks.
Thank you, Blair. Stephanie, anybody else? No? Okay. Please have the record show that Anna Olivia showed up during public comment period, so she is now present.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to item C3, which is approval of minutes from October 19th.
I'd move acceptance.
Okay. Anna Olivia?
Second.
I will second the minutes with there's one minor typing correction. I believe that I even hate to bring it up, just an extra R. Let me see if I can find it. In FERA, it's on page 2. And I think it's 1 R, not 2. Let me see. I'm going to find it if I did. Oh, actually, it's page 3. The committee discussed about 4th paragraph from the bottom, payment plan timeline and outreach to CARE and FERA eligible customers. My understanding it's FERA, F-E-R-A, and not 2 R's.
Okay, so that'll be noted, but it won't be noted as an amendment since that's just a typo.
Oh,
Doesn't change the
no, I'm
standard.
not. I'm almost embarrassed to bring it up because everything else is so perfect
at all.
on it.
Not at all.
But
Thank you, Cynthia.
thank you.
Any other comments from members for adjustments? Hearing none, can we have a roll call for passage, please, of this?
Sure. And it will include the members that made the motion. Member Eldred,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
Pacheco,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Sutter.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And the next item is the CAC Chair Report. And I actually do not have a report today because really the information that I wanted to provide to the folks is actually an agenda item. It's item C6, metrics initiative. So we'll be talking about that later. So I'm going to move on to item C5, which is the Brilliant 100 option. This is an action item from at least as what it was when I understood that this is an action item for the board. So this is an item that I would like us to be able to discuss and take back in terms of advice to the board on Wednesday. I believe Nick is presenting, is that correct?
Yep, I am. Stephanie, can you pull up the slides, please?
Okay, they should be on screen now.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, let me give you, before I jump into the slides, let me give a little background to how we ended up dealing with just the topic of Brilliant 100 and not sort of a broader question of Brilliant 100, but also the creation of a new carbon-free product that would include a nuclear allocation. If folks recall, the origin of bringing forward this new option really started in August with a letter from the city of Hayward requesting that the EBCE board consider allowing individual cities to accept a nuclear allocation to be able to allow them to maintain a carbon-free rate at price parity with PG&E. And so, at our subsequent board meetings, board member Al Mendal was, the primary proponent of this policy and this concept, as this was something that his city had expressed significant interest in. And while other cities had equally expressed interest in this allocation, it was really the city of Hayward that was most engaged with EBC staff around this because they have the most customers on Brilliant 100. Last week at a City of Hayward City Council meeting, when they were taking up this question, the Hayward Council voted to not accept a nuclear allocation and instead to prioritize options around Brilliant 100 and potentially even consider a default opt-up of all customers to Renewable 100. So based on that sort of change in circumstances of the primary sort of proponent of this new revisiting of the nuclear allocation, staff had further discussions with other board members. And what was evident was that without a strong proponent for the creation of this new product, there was lukewarm interest at best, broadly, in taking up what is clearly a really divisive topic, which is whether or not to take nuclear. And so staff felt that it was in the best interest of the agency to leave the current policy as it stands, which is to not accept the allocation, and let that apply on a forward-going basis until such time as board members may want to revisit that. But in the absence of a board member formally asking to revisit that, the agency has a policy, and we see no need to revisit that policy. So that's how we have gotten to where we are. There have been some questions about will this question of the nuclear allocation come back in December. And I think the only scenario where there's any consideration of nuclear in December would be one focused on selling our share of the nuclear allocation to someone else. So in the past, and this is in the spring, there had been some questions about, well, are there other entities out there in California that might want this carbon-free energy in selling our allocation, it would reduce PG&E's carbon-free energy content. It would generate some revenue for EBC, and it would not in any way, shape, or form impact our power content because our customers are not being served with it. So that is still something that we are continuing to explore with some counterparties, and that may be a topic that we bring forward in December. But that is the only circumstance where we would be considering the nuclear allocation for 2021. And again, it would be a scenario where the allocation would effectively be taken and transferred away from EBC to another load serving entity or another participant in the California electricity market, and EBC customers would not see it in any way, shape, or form. So that's sort of the preamble to the topic at hand, which is Brilliant 100 and what to do with Brilliant 100. So can we go to the first slide, please?
All right, there we are.
So we have three options that we are providing as the basis for the discussion and an action. Two, option A and option B are topics that have been discussed at previous board meetings, and I would say some mix of option A or option B had been what the board had directed EBC staff to focus on when we last discussed this in June or July, I believe. I think it was in July. Do we close or end the Brilliant 100 product effective February 1st in this case, because we have extended it from the end of the year through January, and then transition all Brilliant 100 customers either to Bright Choice or Renewable 100, with that transition really subject to the direction that's given to us by the city councils or the board of supervisors of those relevant jurisdictions. That's option A. Option B is to raise the Brilliant 100 rate to a premium above PG&E's rate. I think later on you'll see, but our estimate is in that 2 to 4% range, and in previous presentations we had estimated 2 to 5%. So we're generally speaking still in that range is what we would expect the premium to need to be to reflect its full cost relative to Bright Choice. And then we have a third option that was brought forward first in the context of the potential creation of a new product. But I think it's still something that is worth consideration, and that is to maintain Brilliant 100 at cost parity with PG&E through the end of 2021, but to act now to indicate that EBC will end that product as of the end of this year, thereby giving all Brilliant 100 customers in any jurisdiction that's defaulted onto Brilliant 100 more than adequate time to determine how they want to proceed and potentially do some community engagement and outreach around, do they want to default to Renewable 100, recognizing that it does carry a bit more of a premium, or do they want to default to Bright Choice? So those are the options that we are bringing forward for discussion to the board on Wednesday. Next slide, please. So I think I've given these descriptions, so I'll be quick with this one. I think that the key point here is we assess it as having no fiscal impact because we are no longer subsidizing the Brilliant 100 rate effective to when the rate is closed. So next slide, please. Similarly, I'm sorry, there is a typo here. It should be December 2020, not 2022. My apologies. So this would, as mentioned, set a premium. And so we would come with a specific recommendation for what that premium should be. Should it be 2%, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%, somewhere in that range at the December meeting? Some of the you'll see some of the analysis that we will likely be presenting here to set that premium. But we'd want to dial in a little bit deeper just to make sure that we are very confident that's the right number. Again, we assume no fiscal impact here because we now have raised the cost of this rate to recover costs relative to Bright Choice. And then next slide, please. And then our third option is to maintain Brilliant 100 at parity with PG&E for all of 2021. But close Brilliant 100 to all customers effective Jan 1, 2022. I'm sorry, that this must have been a version of I thought I had made a change to the version. So the second bullet, with the exception of voluntary opt-ins, that actually should be struck, and that we'll make sure that gets struck for Wednesday. So there had been a version of this where there's some consideration of, do we limit Brilliant 100 at price parity to just certain voluntary opt-ins? And I think as staff has been considering this, and if you look at the analysis, if we indeed intend to end this product effective Jan 1, 2022, one, we don't expect a lot of mass opt-ups for just, a partial year as an example. I think generally speaking, it's not a great customer experience to set an expectation for a customer that it's 100% carbon free at price parity for 6 months and then say, well, that's not available to you anymore. You either have to be not 100% carbon free anymore or 100% carbon free at, at that 1 penny a kilowatt hour premium. So our expectation is that even if Brilliant 100 is open in 2021 to customers, there will be limited incremental participation. And so that was a rationale for not continuing the current limits that we have. As you may recall, Brilliant 100 currently is not open to new customer signups. Next slide. And this is where we'll detail the fiscal impact and kind of how we got to our expected costs. So this is there's a lot of information here, so bear with me. So our current estimate is for option C, if we were to serve all current Brilliant 100 customers in 2021, it would result in an incremental procurement cost above revenue of $1.85 million. And you'll see sort of in the following how we got to that 1.85 for existing Brilliant 100 customers. So as a starting point, we wanted to calculate what is the cost differential between Bright Choice and Brilliant 100. And based on some approximate values for carbon-free energy, renewable energy, and taking some assumptions around how much allocation of large hydro we expect to get from PG&E, we arrived at $2.70 a megawatt hour is the procurement cost differential. So that's not the full story though, because Brilliant 100 is priced slightly above. It's that 1% higher revenue that Brilliant 100 generates. And so you have to sort of normalize that $2.70. And so looking at that 4.6% differential, you do some arithmetic, and you see that when you account for that 1% premium that's built into Brilliant 100, you should multiply the $2.70 a megawatt hour by 78% to get to your effective above revenue cost per megawatt hour. And so you see that is how we got to $1.85 million at our 875,000 megawatt hours of Brilliant 100 projected load. So that's your general approximation. Certainly, that number rises if more customers participate in the rate. So for instance, if Dublin, Pleasanton, and Berkeley were to all opt all of their accounts into Brilliant 100 for 2021, it would add an additional $1.9 million of premium to the program. So your sort of total expected premium, if all defaults were to occur, would be just under $4 million a year. But for existing customers, it's 1.85. So that is the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Nick. I'm going to go to the public first. Stephanie, do we have any public comments on this item?
Just a moment, switching screen. I do not have members speaking to this item.
I do see one person
We
did
have
raise their
actually
hand.
Barbara Stebbins. Yes.
Pardon?
That's Barbara Stebbins. And I do not have one signed up, but I can also allow them to speak. So Barbara is first.
Okay. Barbara,
I'm concerned because Jessica Tovar was also supposed to be speaking. I actually wasn't planning to make a comment. I was more planning to ask a couple of questions. But Stephanie doesn't see Jessica there. So
No, I don't have Jessica at all listed.
okay. So let me go ahead and ask my questions quickly. Of course, you know, East Bay Clean Power Alliance has been working overtime, once again, getting word out to the public that East Bay Community Energy was again considering nuclear, and even this time got people coming to us to help us present a webinar on the hazards of nuclear. So of course we are greatly relieved that it's not being considered at this time, and still somewhat in trepidation for what the future might hold. We really think this is such a divisive issue that we would really like to see it laid to rest once and for all, so that, you know, we won't have the people that we work with feeling like they have been betrayed. So I'm not quite sure what Jessica was going to say, and I'm concerned about her because I know she hasn't been feeling well. But let me just ask real quickly, CEO Chassett, I wanted to understand how much of the $2.70 premium has to do with procuring extra renewables. We noticed that in 2019, the renewable content of Brilliant 100 was 75%, which is certainly much higher than was than we thought it was going to be. And we also know that that large hydro is not very much available. And I guess it would be really great at some point for us to be able to compare kind of what average costs are, not contract costs for individual contracts, just the average cost for renewables versus, you know, large hydro. And is when large hydro, when we're having droughts as we are now, does large hydro actually just become not available at all? Or is it just much higher priced at that time? I guess those are my main questions. Thank you.
So Barbara, given kind of the structure of this and what we're talking about, I think, Nick, if you want to answer that very quickly, and you have something, that'd be fine. But I think one of the things that we could do in the future is have an item on our agenda that really talks about these average costs for the various things and enable staff to actually put something together.
So the average cost, if you go to the last slide in the presentation, Stephanie, you know, we do provide at some average costs.
Okay. I didn't see those. I mean, I saw some of them. I didn't know if it was renewables versus hydro, but if it's there, then great.
So if you see this $14 at the top, $14.5, that is your approximate cost of a PCC1 and that is the cost of the renewables incremental to the energy. And so that's how we tend to look at these things, as there is sort of a baseline energy cost, and then there's a cost premium associated with large hydro or renewable. And so I think that's just an important sort of framework to think about this. So a PCC1 renewable costs $14.50 more than null energy. Large hydro costs $5. So if you go down the line, 14.5 for PCC1, $5 LHID, HYD rather, large hydro. And then for Bright Choice, you see it's 12.7, not 14.5, and that's reflective of the fact that Bright Choice has both PCC1s and PCC2s. So, you know, there's a ratio there that brings down your overall cost of renewables a bit. But, you know, if you're looking at a PCC1 versus large hydro, it's almost 3x more expensive. And then to Barbara's point around 2019, it is, yes, it's true that in 2019, large hydro supplies were very limited. And that is why we had a very high level of renewables in Brilliant 100. And certainly that could continue to be a challenge in 2021 and beyond. You know, I think one of the reasons we're recommending we close Brilliant 100 as such at price parity in 2022, not recommending, we're laying it out as an option, is because of the challenge that we have found being able to cost effectively procure the large hydro, which in turn is one of the reasons why we initially had offered this product at the price that we offered it.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Stephanie, did we have Vaughn?
Yes, Vaughn and also Blair Beekman.
Okay,
So I'll
Vaughn,
unmute Vaughn.
great, thank you.
Okay, I'm unmuted, I think. Actually, this is kind of maybe a silly question, but I sense I don't understand how the system works because Pleasanton is not participating in it. It sounds like you have three options for dealing into this service with EBCE, Brilliant 100, Renewable 100, and Bright Choice. And this presentation is trying to indicate that the Brilliant 100 is too expensive. And so you want to kind of phase it out. The thing that, if that's true, then you can confirm that as part of the question. The other part is you keep talking about the Pleasanton communities and stuff, and the Hayward City Council. Does the City Council pick the choices, or do the individuals do it, or does the City Council say, well, we'd like to have that option available to our people, and they pick it or not? And that's not real clear in how it's done, especially for somebody that doesn't do it from the outside. And that, as kind of a side question, is probably not related, but does EBCE always go out, say we want to buy some more power and take bids, or does it have some program where it's constructing new power, kind of referring to the one of the public speakers about the cost of rooftop solar being very, very expensive compared to greenfield or something like that. I mean, it's like the Amador Valley High School parking lot. They did a 1 megawatt for 650,000. If you did that in rooftop solar extrapolate from my 5K system I put on my roof, it would have cost 4.4 million. That's the difference. So if you start doing only parking lots and rooftop, you're never going to be able to afford it. And that the cost of solar power is to the fact that you can build it anywhere, and you build a lot of it. But anyways, my first two questions are probably the most important. Thank you.
So Nick, I think those are pretty quickly answered.
Yeah. So for your first question about local control, yes. For the default, the city decides, your city council, but customers always have the option to change their rate. So if you're defaulted onto Bright Choice, which is our product that we offer at a discount, you as a customer always have a choice to opt up to a higher renewable, higher carbon-free rate. And if you are defaulted to, say, 100% renewable, you have the choice to be able to opt down to the product that is less expensive than PG&E. And then your second question was about building. Yes, we do build new energy generation. We are on the cusp of completing our first wind energy project in the Altamont Pass. We have a large solar project in Southern California that was just completed, and that I think may even have just started generating or will very shortly. And and most all of our energy is procured through competitive solicitation. And anything that is especially any sort of meaningful term or size.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Blair?
Hi, I just wanted to thank yourselves for thinking of the idea to create an informational item in the future about how renewables could work for the ECBE. And I think, you know, to have it at the CACE meeting is a really good place to do that. And looking forward to that. And I like the words of the first speaker tonight. You know, how are we going to address our nuclear issues? That's a lot. And how do we make the transition to an economy of thought and ideas of renewable ideas? Good luck in those efforts and how you can explain that to us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. Do we have any more public speakers, Stephanie?
There are no other speakers for this item.
Great. So I'm going to move to the CAC. I see Ernie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just have a comment for the CAC and then a question or two for Nick. And the comment is I just wanted to share with the CAC that the vote in Hayward was unanimous to refuse nuclear. And also that as a result of the organizing that we did to get that vote, we have kind of encouraged real interest by the city in maximizing local resources, specifically in Hayward moving forward. So I look forward to working with JP and the city and actually getting some resources developed in Hayward over the next year or two. The first question I have is for Nick is actually a silly one. I noticed in the example that you used, you had Berkeley in there, and I don't remember Berkeley ever showing any sign of interest of accepting the nuclear. Was that just randomly because of their load?
No, it's not. So this is not in reference to the nuclear allocation. This is in reference to Brilliant 100.
Yes. Okay. Excuse me.
And there was never I think there was never a question of Brilliant 100 in this round, at least, of the consideration of integrating any sort of quantity of nuclear into Brilliant 100. It was really creating a new product. The reference to Berkeley is Berkeley has Berkeley Energy Commission, as an example, did take up the topic of whether to default all accounts in Berkeley to Brilliant 100. So my thought, the reason I included Berkeley is there are 3 cities that have who are not on Brilliant 100, who have in 2020 had some sort of formal consideration or analysis of it. And so I wanted to just show if they were to take that action immediately, how does that increase the costs to the agency?
Gotcha. Right on. I think nuclear is just so much on my mind that I was sticking it in there. But thank you. And then so my second question is, you talk about possibly bringing this back and having the board consider accepting the Diablo Canyon allocation for resale. I think I know the answer to this question, but if the board if that were to happen and the board were to vote to accept the allocation for resale, would that prohibit us in any way from petitioning or arguing at the CPUC that the Diablo Canyon should not be part of the PCIA formula, or for us trying to get some kind of legislation passed removing Diablo Canyon from the PCIA?
So the allocation, the question of the allocation would never have limited that. So it would not limit this. The only limitation that the accepting the allocation would have put on us is we cannot contest in the ERA proceeding, which is a very specific cost recovery proceeding, that PG&E did not seek to sell the carbon-free attributes. And so in the past, we have actually contested that they're not managing their portfolio because they're not seeking to sell carbon-free energy. And so if we accept an allocation, then we can no longer make that argument. And that is the only limiting factor. So if we were to say sell our allocation, which is probably the best way to describe it, is we're not taking the allocation, we are selling our allocation to somebody else. We would have to accept it, and then you have a sell-on agreement.
Okay,
so
so I think
to the same terms.
Yes, I think you answered my question. And just to be double clear, that was mostly the famous clause B you're talking about, but the first clause in what PG&E stipulated was agreeing that it was a reasonable dispensation of the carbon-free attribute, was my understanding. So that agreeing to that would not prohibit us from in any way working to get Diablo Canyon stricken from the PCIA formula.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I remember having discussions with you about that, and I thought that we had put this one to bed. And truthfully, I think if it's coming back, it's going to come back to us in December, right? It's not.
Yeah, it's not on the, certainly it's not on the agenda
No.
tonight
Right.
or on Wednesday.
Or on Wednesday, right? But Ernie, I do remember asking Nick about this, and I apologize if I didn't bring it back during the chair report, but hearing directly and very clearly that it does not affect it. And I'll look back for my emails and see if I can find it. And if so, I'll send it to Stephanie so she can send that thread out to the CAC. I can't because it's.
Sure. So, yeah, to clarify, Mary, if we're thinking about the same question and answer thread, clause B was addressed, clause A wasn't, which is why I explicitly asked about it right now, and I believe it was answered. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ernie. Monica?
Yeah, so a couple of questions. First, Nick, remind me what cities are interested in Brilliant 100 right now? And have they made any commitment to be on Brilliant 100 for a long period of time? Or indication that they'll be on it forever, or?
No, so there's no indication that any city would be on it forever. Right now, it's Hayward and Albany are the two cities that have defaulted onto the product. Dublin, Pleasanton have recently expressed interest as well. And
so
I included Berkeley because there has been some consideration at their city council and at their energy commission of a citywide opt-up. And so I wanted to provide that sort of as part of the context.
Right. And so there is some, I mean, there's, aside from, I think you mentioned that there's no fiscal impact with option B, which is to keep it, but then set the rate so that it's at parity with PG&E, so you recover all your costs. But there's a little bit of uncertainty associated with option B in that you have to plan for a certain amount of load and then make sure that you can procure it at the cost or at the rate that you published. And so there's a little bit of risk there. And I guess my question is, A, does staff have a preference between A and B? And if you were to eliminate, or if you were to go with A and essentially eliminate B as a tariff, standard tariff or standard product offering, could you offer it as a custom product to those cities who are willing to make like a commitment for say 3-5 years, I agree to be on this product offering, and then you can acquire the resources to meet the product requirement and show them what the costs are going to be. So it's a little more of a less risky in that regard, and still charge it to them at cost or whatever cost plus would you have to be covered.
You're right on the first that there is a little bit of incremental risk because you do have some sort of, there's some uncertainty about the total load. There's uncertainty about how much of the allocation is going to be delivered as well. So it could be higher. I think that's fair. So, you know, that's a caveat that's worth sort of sharing, is that this is sort of a best estimate, but, you know, could it be higher? Yes. How much more? You know, 25, 50%, I think is not out of the realm of possibility. I think I have a hard time seeing it being 10x though, more expensive, or unless somehow every community were to somehow say, we're going to default onto this product right now.
Is there any interest in essentially taking option A of the 3 options that you laid out, but then under a custom arrangement, maybe some, I'm not saying a contract, but some kind of a special arrangement with those cities who want Brilliant 100, you enter into a special service offering for them. And then you can be more transparent about the cost, about what you're procuring on their behalf. and what the rate is that you're going to charge them.
So yes, I think the challenge there is the city can enter into the agreement, but the customers can still opt out. So, for instance, you could very much do that with a municipal account to say, all right, municipal account, if you agree not to opt out for 5 years, we'll go out and buy 5 years worth of large hydro, presumably at a lower cost than if we're buying it year to year. But the challenge would be, how do we do that for tens of thousands of residential accounts who the city doesn't have control over? So the city would have to, in that scenario, likely indicate a willingness for EBC to set an exit fee for those customers.
Right, right. And
Which
so
is
right now with its
possible.
standard tariff, you have a lot of, like the city of Hayward, is 100% of the city of Hayward on Brilliant 100, or have there been opt-outs?
Yes. Yep, 100%, yep.
And nobody has opted out. None of the residents have opted out.
No, I mean, I'm not sure of the numbers. I think it's 5 or 7% have opted down. And then the opt-outs in Hayward, I think, are in line with the averages across the program.
All right, and then embedded within those questions was my question, what is staff's preference of the 3 options?
I would say the preferences tend to be option 1 or 3. I would say option 1 is probably the preference, in that it provides us the most certainty today as to sort of what we need to do from a procurement perspective. We do not need to buy this product anymore, and we'll just go about our business. I do see option 2. I think the challenge is it's probably the worst customer experience of the 3 options, because having 2 products that are both more expensive, the average how much average consumer awareness is there between the difference of 100% carbon free versus 100% renewable? Mostly people want 100% clean, and both are clean. Obviously, there's nuances as to sort of why they're clean and for what reasons. So that's why I tend to think having 2 products above PG&E at 100 that are both 100% may not make sense, especially if one of them is not clearly differentiated. There had been some discussion at past meetings about creating a 100% local renewable product as an example. So that would be very clearly differentiated from 100% renewable, because it has this other, I think,
right,
clearly able to explain, articulate.
Right.
And then, so option 3 obviously carries a cost to the agency as well. And given the current PCIA related constraints, we want to manage our costs, but it's not so significant that, it's, I think, gonna.
So are we looking for a motion from this group?
Yeah, but one of the things I would like to have us as a CAC indicate which options we think are best to put forward, so I can take that back on Wednesday. But
we can only pick one option, right? They're mutually exclusive.
We don't have to. We don't have to pick one option. We can just say we think A or C, or A or B, or B or C. I mean, I think that we can do whatever we want. But before we have that, Jessica has joined as a public person, and she was requesting to speak, and mainly because I know that this was an area of interest. I would like to kind of revert back and hear from Jessica, and then it would be great to have a motion.
And I would like to speak also. I don't know if you saw my hand.
Oh, I didn't see your hand, Cynthia. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we'll go Jessica, and then back to you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Jessica, I think you're up.
Oh, hi. This is Jessica Tovar with East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Sorry, I actually I can't get into the rhythm of the fact that these meetings are earlier than they used to be. So I was waiting around for 7 p.m. So just to add, my intent was to speak at public comment, ask about this process, about the Community Advisory Committee and where that's at. And then as far as the Brilliant 100, East Bay Clean Power Alliance has been suggesting a subsidy of the program so that the cities who are on Brilliant 100, and I imagine the ones that will want to partake in the Brilliant 100 option can do so, but it seems like, you know, subsidizing it for a year or two, something reasonable, but it sounds like that Brilliant 100 is both unsustainable, like, you know, not only environmentally, being that it's been mostly large hydro, or the intent was mostly large hydro, but also the fact that, you know, you can't continue it. It would cost more if you were to continue it, you know, with large hydro. But also just highlighting that since it has had a higher content of renewables, it would be nice to continue it for now, and then have some kind of plan, I guess, to phase it out. Because really, like the renewable 100, that was the intent, right? For, you know, if folks want something that's 100% renewable, they have that option. I think the Bright Choice is a good option for folks that can't do the full 100. And Brilliant 100, we knew just wasn't a good idea in the first place. So it just seems like logical to sunset that at some point. So we, you know, we are encouraging the subsidizing. It seems like it's cheaper than we thought. I don't know if cheaper is the word, but it is not going to cost $3 million. So it just seems like a good idea if cities still want to use Brilliant 100. Few other cities want to get on it. We suggest the subsidy and the sunset. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Cynthia? And then
Yes. Yes. I guess I'm going to move to adopt option C, which is the subsidy. But before I do that, I'd like to get some clarification from Nick regarding the costs. I do have an additional comment, which is that SEIU Local 1021, of which I am a member of, we are very pleased that the East Bay Community Energy has joined with the other 8 CCAs in the state of California opposing nuclear energy. And those 8 entities are Sonoma Clean Power San Francisco, Marin Clean Power, Peninsula Clean Energy, Valley Clean Energy, Monterey Bay Community Power, and Redwood Coast Energy in not taking the nuclear energy, at least for the upcoming year. I would like to also add that I do not believe that if we are not taking the nuclear energy, then we should not be in the business of selling nuclear energy. I see that incompatible with our vision for a cleaner energy. Noting that, yes, it is fossil-free nuclear, but there are other potentially grave environmental impacts to including nuclear energy. That being said, I think for 2021, or excuse me, 2022, we should be looking at more renewable energy, and especially generating that renewable energy from Alameda County using the local business development plan that we adopted. And my question to Nick is, I heard 2 figures tonight, a subsidy of 1.85 million. And that I think is for only the cities of Albany and Hayward, if I'm correct. And then you mentioned another, I guess if other cities were brought in, I don't know if that would be Dublin and Pleasanton, in addition to Albany and Hayward, whether that would bring the price up to 4 million. But I also want to note that overall, through your leadership, Nick, and also the staff and the JPA board, and I would like to modestly say the CCA also, we are in fairly good, we are in very good financial, position. And we did get some additional monies, as I understand it, this year that perhaps were not anticipated. So if the cost is under 4 million, and I think we heard not only SEIU Local 1021, but we heard from other groups, the opposition to nuclear energy. And we do have enough money, it appears, in our budget. Then why don't we just consider subsidizing up to 4 million, so that the other two cities, if I'm correct, Dublin and Pleasanton, could be have that option, subsidizing that for 2021, and then close, which is option C, and close Brilliant 100 effective January 1st, 2022, while we explore other renewable options.
Thank you, Cynthia. So we have a motion on the table to adopt option C. Anna Olivia?
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I would like to second it with Cynthia if this is friendly. Option C as our preference, option A as a second, if that is friendly to you, Cynthia. And then I had a little clarification, a comment that I wanted to add.
Sure.
Awesome, thank you. So I did look up my notes in regards to the thing that Ernie was talking about earlier, and I had misremembered in the last meeting. It was Todd, not JP. And Ernie is correct in saying that it was the other clause that was the concern. Initially, they both were, but staff was really good at addressing community concerns around Clause B. Clause A was that inclusion of the of utility generated power into the PCIA with the option for receiving the free incremental cost allocation of the carbon-free energy was an appropriate way to handle that utility generated power. And so that is where the concern had come from, not from the other thing. So just as clarification. So we don't need to talk about that more. I just wanted to clarify that that's where the concern was and not in the other clause, because staff did thoroughly discuss that one. So yeah, seconded motion, friendly amendment accepted.
Great, thank you, Anna Olivia. So we have an motion to adopt option C with option A as our secondary recommendation. Jane?
Thank you. I just am like, Nick, maybe you could clarify. I think I have a question here, because my understanding was that, Hayward was really the driver for continuing to consider this, even keeping Brilliant 100 on the table. And with their interest withdrawn, can you just clarify where the demand is coming from for this product? It seems to me that if the demand is not there, keeping it on the table, it doesn't seem like the best option, even though we do have the resources, I would think that $4 million would be better spent, for example, in the LDBP, if that's an option, or in direct procurement and investment in actually building, resource adequacy here in our local service area. So that's, I think, a question for you, Nick. And then, I'd just say that, personally, I would be more interested in option A than option C. So that's just where I stand on it.
I think that that's right. The vast majority of the costs of current Brilliant 100 would be incurred serving Hayward customers. There are, to a much lesser degree, customers in the city of Albany, and then the third category are municipal accounts. So it's, let's say 80, 10, 10, or something on that order is probably how, or 70, 10, 15, 15, or somehow something on that order is where you would look at Hayward, then Albany, and municipal accounts. And then, certainly if other cities or customers wanted to participate, they could. It would increase costs. Their participation would be limited to just 2021 under option C. I do tend to personally agree with you, though, Jane, that these funds probably could be put to more impactful climate investments than buying some large hydro for a short period of time under a short-term contract.
Thank you, Jane. Monica, did your hand go down and then back up?
Yeah, because I wanted to. It was
what I'd
good
like
like
to do, I want to hear from Monica, then I'm going to speak, and then I'd like to call the vote.
Okay.
So
I was going to make a motion before we went back to public oral comments. And so my motion, and I don't know if I can make a motion now that there's a motion, but my alternate motion is to support.
We would have to, sorry, Monica, we'd have to call the first motion.
Okay. Well, generally, if I just to speak to it, I prefer option A, and for the reasons that Jane pointed out as well.
Okay, thank you, Monica. I will say that the motion as it stands when we have it, I'm not going to support it for the same reasons that Jane is saying. I feel like I would prefer to not subsidize one city or two cities when we are a regional and a county-wide effort. And so I would prefer to have that money available to be used across the county. So that would be my vote. We can take this up right now. The motion is to adopt option C with option A as our secondary option. So we can vote on that and see.
Looks like Ernie has a hand up.
Motion. I'd like to clarify, if I may. I think I can ask for clarification. When I made the motion and Olivia seconded, my motion was not to limit the subsidy just to Hayward and Albany, but that this would be an option. So I think it would be up to 4 million, perhaps, but that this option would be available to all the members that sit on the JPA. So that would include Dublin, the cities of Dublin and Pleasanton. And the other thing that I note is that prior to this, the cost was 3 million, and now it's gone down to 1.85 million, which I know I talked a lot, and which Nick didn't clarify why it was reduced from 3 million to 1.85 million. But the intent of my motion was to include all cities that chose to take option C.
Okay. Yeah. No, that is what that is what the motion was. So Stephanie, can we call the please?
Did Ernie have a hand up on this? I just see.
No, unless it came up late. I just saw it. Ernie.
Yeah, well, I'll just speak on this briefly. So I actually agree with Jane and I think Monica and Mary that option A is better for the agency. If this was a blank slate, I would proactively vote for that. But this was an actual, I guess, compromise and a work to actually have consideration for Albany and Hayward and get this issue put to bed. And so that's why I will support option C primarily, and then following that with option A. And that's all. But I'm sorry, I will say I misunderstood Cynthia. And I guess it's just been clarified by you, Mary, that this isn't just for the existing Billion 100 customers. This would be for everybody.
But that's what option C is. Option C is for everyone.
Okay.
It's just, as Nick said, 80% of option C is Hayward. So at this point, could be more. Okay, Stephanie, can you call a vote?
Sure, and this is for the motion to accept option C as the first option and option A as a second. I'll also include the members that made the motion. Member Eldred?
Yes.
Landry?
Yes.
Pacheco?
Yes.
Padilla?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
No, thank you. Frank?
No.
Sutter?
No.
Thank you. The motion fails. It's tied.
So I guess the question that I put to the CAC, given what I've heard from everyone, I can simply take back to the board that we were unable to come to a decision. We are split kind of between, at least I've heard from 3 of us, that we have option A, and the other 3 really would prefer option C with option A as a backup. Or we can put it to a vote to have option A, which I have a feeling will also not pass. But as a CAC, you want to go through those motions and have option A as a thing and then vote? Or should we just drop it and I can present to the board kind of this whole process of what we've
Mary,
talked
I think that is a good thing, that we all agree in A and C, and that there are different considerations looking at, and either one is a reasonable choice, and present maybe the ideas behind the other 2, like C, so it gives the communities time to figure out what to do, and A, because it frees up more money for something else. Like, they're both good options. I don't think we're really in a battle here.
Yep. So I think that's what I would like to do, unless I hear something from other folks saying that they want to have an official motion.
And that
And I
sounds
see
good.
Monica, your
That
hand is
sounds
up,
good.
as so is Ernie's still.
Oh, I'll take it down.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind calling the vote on just accepting option A.
Okay, can you make that motion?
I move that we accept option A.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Stephanie, can you call the vote, please?
Wait, do you have C as a backup or just A?
Nope,
Just
just
A.
A. I don't like C.
Okay, are we continue with the motion or?
Good. No, we're
So
continuing.
more
The motion
discussion.
is to adopt option A.
Okay, so for this vote, Eldred,
No.
Landry,
No.
Pacheco,
No.
Padilla,
Yeah.
Frank,
Yes.
Sutter.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion failed.
Okay, so just so you know, I'll present this, and Anna Olivia, I think you had a good idea. It gives time to the community for option C, more money available within LDBP for option C. I'm sorry, option A. So let's move on. Thank you, Nick, for talking us through this. Let's move on to item C6. And this is a metrics initiative that is actually that Jane and I have been working on with JP for about a month. So we have a presentation. I'm going to start us off, and then JP is going to follow on with the presentation. So I am going to figure out and share my screen. And let me put on the PowerPoint first, though. Oops, just a second. I'm not sure I'm sharing the right screen. Just a second. There, that one. All right. So can everybody see the screen? All right, so this is a metrics initiative that I want to give a little background to first before I talk about what the actual initiative is. So the figure that you see and cannot read, and Cynthia brought that out, and I realized that we couldn't read this. It is a figure on page 7 of the LDPP. I should have sourced what this is. It does say figure 1 from this, but it has the LDPP put 3 different stages, and 2018 to 2020 is this first stage. 2021 to 22 is the expansion, 23 is the LDP updates. And the important components about that is really in 21 to 22, that little language that you can't see that has arrows going to it is the midterm assessment of these LDBP program performance and outcomes. So essentially the metrics that they had, and it's goes further, it indicates that it's using the LDBP tools and frameworks that they had. For example, IMPLAN was one of these, and that they described clear and transparent public reporting. The other thing about these stages that are important to pay attention to is in 2023, there is slated to be a comprehensive assessment of these programs and outcomes and the ability to expand and refine the current metrics that were in the plan. So that's just kind of the background, because it had been a while since I'd looked back at the plan, and I wanted to really tie this metrics initiative that we're working on directly to the plan. So this is the timing. I think the timing of this initiative fits very well within these stages. The other thing, a little bit more background, is there were 7 of these performance metrics that were put forward in the plan. And it is these 7 that we're going to really pay attention to as part of at least this particular effort and initiative. So the initiative itself is the people involved are really myself and Jane doing a little bit of work and time and effort with JP and staff outside of this, bringing information back, but it will be a full CAC effort. And because it's going to the CAC, it is by its nature a public effort. This is something that we plan to work on between now and the end of our term, which is June 30th, 2021. And we were thinking about, well, why are we doing this? I think that this work will happen regardless of whether or not the CAC becomes directly involved, but it really is a way to systematically include the CAC and the public in what's going on in these metric discussions. I have a full belief that JP would be bringing this stuff to us, but at this point, we now know and can really think about when we want to hear these things. And we've been in contact with JP and talking about when we might see these things. So we're trying to accomplish in this initiative 3 different activities. One is really to document where EBC stands in terms of their stage 1 efforts. This is not a metric type of effort, but really thinking about all of the things in the plan that were supposed to happen in stage 1 and documenting it. And it's supposed to be what I'm calling a qualitative documentation. So staff's going to really provide a high level, somewhat objective. There may be numbers associated with some of it, but it's a description of the status of these multiple items there, because certain things didn't happen, but they added certain things. The second thing is to really document and track the actual metrics. So those 7 metrics and come up with actual values that are tied to those metrics. And lastly, it's to describe what has been going on in terms of social equity and just transition. These are the beneficial pillars that are in our CAC work plan to really follow up on and are part of the LDBP, and how they're being addressed right now through current EBC activities. Whether or not those EBC activities are directly tied to the LDBP funding that JP oversees or happen through procurement, other aspects, thinking about it holistically. So those are the 3 things that we want to accomplish between now and the end of June. We're planning to do this in an iterative and cyclical type of process where Jane and I talk with staff about these areas. We bring it back to the CAC, talk about all of these areas and have discussion. From there, we then go back and talk to JP, and it goes back and forth that way. Right now, we have a tentative timeline for this initiative in December. Today is just an introduction. This is an informational item for us. But in December, JP will be coming to us and talk about what EBC we will be able to track in the customer relation management database, CRM, which is one of the main data sources that is expected to be included in the metrics. And in January, to talk with us about the IMPLAN results. The IMPLAN was one of the models that gave a lot of the numbers, the scenarios within the plan. So that's the second data source. And then take a few months as staff goes away and comes up with all of these. And in April, really provide us with certain CRM results. So that's the basics of it. The other thing I wanted to leave everybody with is really with metrics. I've worked with metrics, and others may have as well in their business life. And they're hard to create sometimes. And also, I think that this quote that took me a while to figure out, nobody knows if it should be Albert Einstein or this person named William Bruce Cameron who said this, but really not everything that counts can be counted. So a metric to me is a count type of thing. You have a goal, you have a target. So not everything that counts really can be counted, and not everything that can be counted really counts. So this is just a overarching thing that I kind of wanted to leave us with as we as a CAC thought about metrics and what to move forward. I'd like to turn it now over to JP, and I'm going to stop sharing, and Stephanie's going to pull up his presentation.
Thanks, Mary. So yeah, as Mary said, we've been chatting about this and wanted to give you all an update on where we are and some of the activities that we've been working through in that phase 1 and into phase 2 of the local development business plan as it relates to metrics. So Stephanie, if you can go to the next slide. Wanted to talk through some of the tools, and I'll be describing these tools in greater detail later in the presentation that we have and that we are developing as we look to report out on some of the metrics. You know, I think the local development business plan was kind of wise in that phasing, because you really need to have some run rate on your programs in order to start reporting out on them. And you know, we've really been getting going, and we're now starting to enroll customers in some of our early programs and start to get some of the actual enrollment and benefits activities out of those first programs. But it takes a while to get ramped up, and so now we can start to report out on those activities. But as Mary mentioned, the local development business plan activity did build an in-plan model, and that model was really used to, build out the initial programs, program areas as were suggested in the business plan, and we've been working off of that model to a large degree. So the good news is that the scenario analysis tool that was developed through that community impact input process, with pretty minor modifications on a lot of the programs, can be used to kind of model those outputs and model those 7 key metrics that were identified in the local development business plan. And we're starting to engage on that now. Examples of that are, our vehicle electrification and some of our building electrification work, as well as energy efficiency, can be run through that tool with some slight modifications on the dollars invested and the types of programs that we have invested these first couple years of local development dollars into. So we're working on that now, and while looking at that model and diving into how it was developed, it's certainly also apparent that some of the programs that we have invested in, like our community innovation grants or our Connected Communities program, which is very much focused on our most vulnerable communities, or supporting things like reach codes. Those are not as easily incorporated into the tools. And so we have to also figure out what are the other ways that we can measure the benefits, approximate the benefits of those programs, because some things fit into that model and some are harder to model in that current in-plan tool. And the other thing is that the in-plan tool really kind of looks regionally and uses figures on greenhouse gas emissions or dollars invested that create jobs and direct jobs and indirect jobs, but doesn't really track what's happening with our actual customers and the benefits that are accruing to our actual customers. Like which customers are participating in which programs, and are those customers living in disadvantaged communities or low-income communities? Are they care customers or medical baseline customers? To get that real actual information out, you need a way to track it. And so one of the things that we have invested in and are now starting to launch is a customer relationship management tool. I'll describe that a little bit in further detail. But that will really help us to track actual customer participation, actual locations of benefits that are accruing to customers through our programs. So we really need both of those things to work together to get a good level of detail on the impacts of our programs. So if we go to the next slide. So let's see. Yeah, the activities that we're working on. So as I mentioned, we are looking at this tool and now modifying, looking at ways how we can modify it to evaluate the benefits of the approved programs that we have underway now. We are also developing and launching Salesforce CRM, as well as a couple of other applications that will tag on to that. I'll describe that in further detail. And we have some other activities as well. So we, through one of the state laws, GO 156, we have to report on the suppliers that we are signing contracts with and how those are supporting local vendors as well as minority, women-owned, LGBTQ-owned businesses. And so we kind of already have a mechanism for tracking where our dollars are going and the types of businesses that our dollars and our contracts are supporting. And so we're currently looking at ways to kind of expand that tracking to evaluate job creation kind of metrics. So who are suppliers hiring? How are they hiring those people? Potentially from where are they hiring? Though that can start to get somewhat detailed and challenging, but we're looking at kind of how we can utilize that framework to, again, track something that is pretty specific around the actual jobs that are being created through our work. And then also building and tracking kind of the reporting forms that our contractors and implementers who we're partnering with to fulfill on our programs can provide data back to us that we can then track and load back into Salesforce. And so, for example, with energy efficiency programs, when you contract with a third-party vendor, you want to be able to track where they completed their work, what type of work they completed, and then actually track actual savings, because we're trying to do these pay-for-performance type energy efficiency programs. So we not only want to track the modeled savings, but we also want to track the actual savings. And we need a way to bring that information back into our systems of record. And Salesforce is a tool that will help us do that. And as I'll describe later, is one of the reasons we actually selected that system so that we can report back on our program activities. So we want to be able to track actuals where we can and where it's possible, and then also rely on the scenario planning tool when the actuals can't be tracked. And I'll talk briefly about kind of the complexity of some of that tracking a little bit later on. And then lastly, there are social impacts that are not as easily tracked by the current tools, the scenario analysis tool, or really the local development metrics as they were first laid out, which are kind of regional in nature. And so we need to work on how we can track those. And there's some good activity already underway within the organization on tracking some of these that we've already implemented. So, for example, we've recently done some work analyzing the COVID-19 impacts to energy use in our vulnerable communities. We've also been looking at how CARE can reduce arrearage and disconnection. Is CARE essentially an effective tool in our service territory for assisting customers who are having trouble paying their bills, as well as evaluating energy burden to our vulnerable communities and environmental burdens in our local communities that can help us direct some of our programs to parts of our communities that are most heavily impacted. And so really evaluating and building up and building on the metrics that we've already got in place for tracking some of those social and just transition benefits that we want to track. And I think that'll be an ongoing program through this cycle, as well as into 2023 and phase 3, when we start to look at how else we can be tracking the benefits of our programs. So if we go to the next slide, please. So I'll talk briefly about the tools that we have now. So this is the transition, some of the transition documents that we got with the in-plan model. So we'll be able to kind of input dollars invested and local renewables and transportation investments that we are investing in through our local development business plan. And really, it's not limited to the LDBP, because there's lots of other activities that the organization does that results in local benefits. So we've got the wind farm that's now going up. We've got some local solar projects that we are evaluating. There's EBCE procurement activities that are occurring outside of the local development business plan. So, we're looking kind of across the organization, and as well as the program framework that we have built out. And so that will then output the metrics as defined in the local development business plan for economic, environmental benefits as described. So again, we'll be modifying this tool to incorporate the existing approved programs that we already have, and providing you some feedback on the timeline that Mary proposed around those modeled outputs. If we go to the next slide, please. So Salesforce CRM is a great tool. I've got a lot of experience with it. We've got great folks on board, as well as some consultants that we've brought on who can really help us deploy this tool. And we selected this customer relationship management tool for a variety of reasons, but certainly one of the main drivers was its ability and our ability to track actual program activities and program reporting and input it back into the tool. So this is the tool that's being used now by Marin Clean Energy, as well as Peninsula Clean Energy. MCE's been using it for a while now to track their energy efficiency programs. And they essentially, one of the reasons they initially used it was they needed a tool to better incorporate implementer feedback from their energy efficiency programs, automate the reporting back to the PUC, which is really how to track, again, actual program implementation activities for tracking metrics. So we very much selected it with that in mind. And then I've selected an implementer, Aqueous, who has kind of an application that sits on top of Salesforce, which is really a robust kind of program management and reporting tool. And so that will give us the ability to run and manage our own incentive programs, as well as build in these automated reporting capabilities for the programs that we're running. And then we're also using Pardot, which is another kind of Salesforce application that will really help us automate marketing and to facilitate customer enrollment in the programs that we are running out, and help us kind of A/B test our marketing messaging so that we can really kind of boost enrollment and enable a wide range of our customers to enroll in the programs that we are launching. We are really trying to engage our customers and the programs we're running instead of just letting a third party do it. We want to be at the head of that. Our resilient home activities are certainly an example of that. Yeah, so we're launching that now, and then that will be an ongoing program as we continue to deploy and roll out this activity through this year and next. So those are a couple of the tools that we are now really implementing to help us manage these programs. If we go to the last slide, please. So just a little bit on kind of metrics and how they evolve and change over time, and some of the tracking challenges, opportunities that we have. I did want to kind of come back to, there's some things that are easy to track and some things that are harder to track. And so like customers who are enrolled in care, or megawatts of solar that are deployed in county or on our customers' rooftops, or the dollars invested. These are things that are fairly easy to track. Some of the things that are a little harder to track are things like the avoided criteria pollutants from a solar plant. Now, you can certainly understand when a solar system is generating electricity, but understanding which power plant ramps down at which time, at which hour of the day, reducing particulates in Alameda County based on that solar system, that's actually much harder. And that's why you use something like an in-plan model to model those benefits, as opposed to trying to track actuals. Now, of course, if we are able to shut down a power plant like the Dynegy plant with our battery, that's something that we can track. But tracking, hourly impacts of NOx reduction from, say, a solar system, that's a little harder. Also, kind of jobs created, or potentially low-income jobs created, tracking back to an individual person and what their income level is and were they hired to do a job. That can be tricky. We're going to try through our diversity supplier reporting to kind of extract some of that out. And it's certainly something that we're thinking about as we build partnerships with Cypress Mandela and Rising Sun, and other job training organizations. Is definitely something that we are going to look to report on. But that's a hard one, as well as something like indirect job creation from particular industries. So again, these are things that tend to be modeled. And then there's other activities that we're going to track the actual hard numbers on. And then lastly, kind of recognizing that some of the underlying modeled outputs will change over time. So early on, as solar was being deployed and there wasn't a lot of solar, you could directly tie new solar to reduction in GHGs or reduction in a particular plant. But that has actually changed over time as more and more solar has come on. Then now new solar is potentially even not being used because there's so much solar on the grid. So that's why our solar plants tend to have storage associated with them, because we want to make sure that we're using that solar energy. But over time, these types of metrics will change, and we need to stay on top of the model. And so our goal will really be to kind of track actuals where we can with the CRM and feedback those into the scenario tool to understand the modeled outputs and make sure that there's no kind of double counting, because that's the risk when you run two separate tools, is making sure that you're not counting for some megawatts in some actuals and then double counting that and not accounting for that in the framework and the tool and the model that you're running, so that we make sure we're kind of giving the full picture and not creating any double counting issues. So that's kind of an update on where we are, and we're really excited to continue to work with you all and report out on where we are as we work through this metrics process this year.
Thank you, JP. Stephanie, do we have any comments from the public?
Let me unmute myself. I have 4 speakers for this item: Audrey Ichinose, Blair, Barbara Stebbins, Dana Dumont-Stoke.
Okay, so Audrey and then Blair.
Thank you very much. I wanted to express my appreciation, Mary, to you and Jane for, taking up this initiative. Because I think there are some things that can be improved upon, and I'm very, very much tickled by your saying about not everything counts. That counts can be counted, etc. So I wanted to call your attention to one of the items on the list of 7 categories, and that was customer savings. And it seemed to me a very passive way, of regarding our customers, and not seeing them as actors, participants, contributors to this whole enterprise of community energy, and especially with the item of demand response, because of the problems in August. Demand response really came to the fore. And that is where I think customers really contribute. And you need to be able to show their participation in that way. So I guess my question is it possible to modify this category, customer savings, and see it more in terms of how the customer, builds up credits and, maybe their use of electricity, or, I don't know, this is really a little far-fetched for me, but I really want to see if we can be more, get into including the customer and not just count how much we're saving them. If they participate, it would be terrific. So I think that I don't know the particulars of what EBCE plans for its demand response programs with maybe Ohm Connect, or I don't know the details of those things, but I wonder if we could start at that point to view the customer not as a passive recipient of these benefits, but as a contributor as well. So thanks very much.
Great. Thank you, Audrey. I think that when JP comes back to us in, I can't remember if it was December or January. No, December, next month, talking about what they may be able to track within the CRM. I think that might give a better sense. I will say of what is coming out of this. I will say that these metrics were created by the public process that went into the plan. And so we're kind of sticking with these, but that doesn't mean that other information is not going to be available. You're always going to know how many people, I think, participate if you're figuring out their savings. But let's go to Blair.
Hi, thank you for this item. It seemed a really good informational item, a good way to learn things. I'm going to have to review it to better understand what it's trying to say, but it seemed like it offered something to spark the imagination of people and how to think about this process. And what the previous speaker said, it can introduce how, community can have a more active role in local community energy, which is the whole point of what we're doing. What I feel with community energy is how can the community become more involved in this process? And I talk about, my accountability with technology stuff I work on. It's the same thing. How can the community have a more engaged, interactive, one-on-one role with its government about what technology is going to be placed in their community? And that conversation can now be allowed where it wasn't before. And so, this is all part of steps we're taking that I think offers a really interesting future and at the local community level. And it's that derivation towards ideas of peace and good practices and good democratic practices, that that's how we build our future and work with the rest of the world, basically. You know, local communities doing their good, peaceful deeds, and that's what builds things. So thank you for this item. And yeah, anytime you offer informative items like this, it offers creative imagination and thought, and it's nice. So thank you.
Thank you, Blair. Stephanie, do we have Seda? And then who was the fourth person?
I have Barbara Stebbins, who's not raised her hand, and Vaughn is also, there's Barbara, and Vaughn would also like to speak to this item.
Okay, so Seda, Barbara, and then Vaughn.
Okay, Jada, your microphone is unmuted.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, Jada Durmaz-Dogan with Local Clean Energy Alliance. First of all, thanks for starting such an initiative. Metrics are critical, and this initiative is very valuable. And I also would like to emphasize the importance of community engagement in this process. I know that you said on page 1 of your plan that the LDBP went through an extensive public process. Therefore, this initiative does not revisit the established metrics. However, I would like to remind you that the metrics came at the end of that process, and there was not enough opportunity for the public to make comments about the metrics. So regardless of that, like even if you don't revisit the metrics, it's important to reach out to the organizations that have connections in frontline communities to understand things such as like what kind of local jobs would bring more benefits to their communities. So we would like to ask for a workshop where the community can weigh in on this plan of metrics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry for not saying your name right, Jada. I apologize for that. Barbara and then Vaughn.
So first, I want to also thank Mary and Jane for jumping into what is going to be a very difficult process and task to undertake. I also want to really compliment JP Ross for several very thoughtful comments I heard around trying to develop the metrics, because I think metrics can, as Mary's little quote said, you know, sometimes the way metrics work is not particularly helpful nor particularly meaningful. I have a few questions that I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask what fiscal impacts really means, whether that is mostly about the EBCE budget. And in terms of customer savings that Audrey commented on, I wonder if that will also take into account adders. I don't know that adders are still being offered on some of the net metering. And I'm trying to remember if there were other adders that we have talked about, and other incentives that are being offered. Will that be part of that? We'd really like to make sure that local business activity is included, like especially locally owned businesses and businesses that employ locally. I know you're looking at the jobs aspect, but I wasn't quite clear if that was also just looking at contracting with local businesses, because that money also tends to stay more in the community. There are others, but you know, I'm not going to focus on those because there's a more important point I want to raise, which is these metrics can then become the basis for equity, for really being able to measure the equity impact of various programs, because you can take the metrics as a baseline and then look at how those metrics vary according to, say, race, or according to average income, or according to various other kinds of different populations that we, especially those that are most vulnerable, that need the most help, that we want to see prioritized as we move forward in a more equitable, more locally controlled and owned energy agency, electrical agency. I have a couple really good definitions of racial equity impact assessment that I don't have time to share, but I will forward them on to Mary and Jane, and also you, JP Ross, because I think they're very easy to understand how racial equity can be measured. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Vaughn?
Okay. Yeah, Blair kind of touched on something about when you're bringing this to the community. A lot of people's eyes glaze over. They have other things to do in their life than follow this kind of stuff. So when you come up with the metrics, there has to be a presentation that whichever audience you're talking to, whether it's the nuclear physicists at Livermore or the junior high school kids in the inner city or the rural areas, are trying to figure out what you're saying, you're going to have to address those as separate people, because I worked for 23 years as a support engineer for the bankers and those kind of people who were ripping off the rest of society for the most part. But anyways, the presentation you make has to be to the audience. The people I worked with were very high paid, much higher paid than I was, and were responsible for multiple hundreds of systems around the world that were running or not running, as when they called. And how you presented it to them had to be something they already had a base of understanding, because they had other options, or they had other things in their mind when they were presented. So your metrics have to mean something to a different audience each time, and it has to inform them, I guess, to the point where they want to stay, or they at least can see where they're in it. The other part of it is there's going to be a lot of people in society that don't have time for this. They have a family to do and all that kind of stuff. It won't mean anything to them. And that kind of comes back to local community. The proposed future that a lot of the intermittent energy sources are coming into is where you have to have storage, and the storage nowadays is 2 to 4 hours, and some people call long term is 10 to 15 hours. Long duration has to be days, weeks, or months. If you're going to have power generated in your own community and be able to use it, you need to store it for a long period of time. When the sun's shining, you store it, and when it's winter, you reuse it. And the technology is changing very rapidly. I don't know how you're going to capture that, but it can't always be to save the jobs. I mean, the oil companies are trying to save the oil company jobs as much as they can right now, and that's actually restricting the rest of society from succeeding. It may even kill us if we don't get it done in the next 10 or 15 years. We had 40 years and we never did anything. So when you start measuring the jobs, you're gonna have to measure them. Is this a restraint on society, or is it something that really benefits the society and continuing forward, in addition to make sure everybody understands it, or otherwise they're going to resist against it? Thank you.
Thank you, Vaughn. So I don't think we have any more public speakers. Is that correct, Stephanie?
That is, there are no more speakers for this item.
Okay. Cynthia and then Ernie. And then Ann Olivia. Cynthia, you're on mute if you're talking.
Okay, thank you. I think it was an excellent presentation, and thank you, Mary and Jane, for taking the lead. I would like to request, because I read over all the items this evening, I would like to request, JP, that the PowerPoint that you just went over be sent to the CAC committee, and also that it be posted as a public document if it's not already posted, because we are seeking community engagement and input in this document. So I would like it to be available to the public. I do agree that with Barbara that we need to also capture the local business activity, and I don't I don't have everything in front of me, but I don't know if
Cynthia, you're still mute, or can't hear you all of a sudden.
me. No, you can't hear me.
Now we can.
Okay. Okay. So I don't know when I
Wanted
stopped.
local business activity. You're
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. And then I would like, I don't know if there's metrics on this specifically, JP, but I would also like to see some labor metrics in terms of union jobs. And also, if we are doing any metrics to outreach to the disadvantaged communities also, whether and lastly, I would like to see another presentation for the public, and I concur with that comment also. Thank you.
So Cynthia, I will respond to a couple things and then we'll move on to Ernie and then Anna Olivia and then Monica. One, you were sent this document by Adrian earlier today, and it is also online. So I think that's occurred. The thing that was sent to you had JP's presentation at the end.
Not the presentation that he gave tonight. Your presentation was there, and the two front pages were there, but it appeared to me to be a different document.
I can check in with Adrian. He sent it to the CAC earlier before our meeting, but it is online. So
okay, thank you.
The other thing I'm going to say with folks is I'm hearing more and more about the various metrics. Jane and I talked about this. We are going to first move forward with these 7 metrics that are there and kind of put what we're talking guardrails around them to get these in place. And at that point, I think that there can be room for discussion afterwards. I think Jada had a pretty good idea about having a workshop for the public where we can start talking about these more. But I will say that this initiative right now is not to expand that list, but to move forward with what is there to the extent that it makes sense and can work with that. Because we need to work with what's there. And then we definitely, I think that everything that I'm hearing says people are going to want different and new metrics.
And Mary, I would just add, we will be capturing some of this local business activity through this GEO 156 reporting. So that is an initiative that's underway, and we'll be able to track that, across EBCE's activities, not just local development activities.
Right. So I think what's going to happen is other things are going to come out. It's just they're not specific to these 7 initiatives. And I think that JP, maybe you can talk to that more in December in terms of things that you think might be able to show up given what we've heard from folks. Okay, now Ernie, Anna Olivia, and then Monica.
Well, my laptop decided to turn itself off right when this started, and I hadn't had a chance to review this beforehand. But I want to say this looks great, and I really want to say thank you to you, Mary, and Jane, and JP for working on this. This is like a great path moving forward. This is like super important, and so thank you. I also want to second the recommendation by Jada. I think it really would be important and helpful to do a workshop, perhaps co-facilitated by Local Clean Energy Alliance and the groups that they represent. It's entirely possible, like you were just saying, Mary, that other metrics might be proposed by the community. I imagine mostly they will help us weigh the metrics that you've already picked out. And yeah, there may be 1 or 2 added. But again, this looks great. And one quick comment, we've talked about it in the past. I didn't see it in a speed read of the document, but jobs should also be broken down by local jobs. And we discussed previously, weighing them in concentric rings by jobs that are within our service territory or by workers that live within our service territory, and with a diminishing rating as those workers are further out from our territory. But anyway, again, this looks great. a great path forward. And thank you so much for working on it.
Great. Thank you, Ernie. And Olivia, then Monica.
Thank you. JP, this is awesome. Like the thing that you are trying to do right now is really hard. And having had to develop metrics in the past, it's really complicated. And like, how do you measure things accurately and that kind of stuff? So I really want to put a lot of props towards you and Mary and Jane for your leadership in this. The resource that Barbara mentioned, the racial equity impact analysis, has some tools in there that I think you'll find helpful, because starting with the data that you will already have collected, there's ways to analyze that data just kind of in subcategories, like closing down the peaker plant in Jack London, for example. Like you can show this is how far pollutants travel from this facility. This is the community of concern belt that's right there. So this is actually having impacts in this community. Jobs breakdown by Piedmont or Livermore or East Oakland or whatever it is. Like you can really break some of those things down with the data you've already collected, which makes it easier to not have to collect even more data, but just ways to look at the information you already have from your really clearly sophisticated systems. However y'all are going about developing the social metrics, I'm excited to see it, because the work that EBCE is doing in the community and the impact that you've had during COVID has made me really, really proud to be part of this, and like feel like the 6 years or whatever that I put in at this point, that it's really making a difference in my community that I can see on a regular. And I hope that there is a way to capture the phenomenal impact that those community development grants and all the support work that you're doing to be able to capture that and share with people, because I don't know that people understand the level of support that y'all really are providing right now. So I just wanted to acknowledge it. And I'm excited to see how that goes. And I always volunteer for this kind of stuff. But you know, the document Barbara's sending is great. Thanks for that. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. Monica?
Yeah, so just saying thank you to you and to Jane for leading our team for our effort on this. I appreciate that somebody's doing it. I'm glad it's not me. And then to JP, yeah, I think the stuff, I'm not going to add a whole lot of comments or ask for a whole lot of stuff from what you're doing. I feel like once you start to get into the data and start measuring things and reporting things, you'll find new things to report and measure. And I just applaud you for the effort you've done so far and look forward to seeing your first set of reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So I see 3 hands up, but you guys have all talked. So I think that is it. Jane, did you want to say anything before we move on to the next item?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think my contribution is already in the slides you presented, Mary. So thank you.
Okay.
Mary, I did find, my apologies. I probably was looking at the wrong version, but I did find the updated version of this document. So my apologies to you and to Adrian, who as always does, and Stephanie, who always do a great job. So thank you.
Great. I'm glad you have it. JP, sounded like you had one thing you wanted to add before we move on.
Yeah, just a quick response to Ernie's point. In the in-plan model, that is broken down by local direct and indirect jobs, as well as out of county direct and indirect jobs. So, you know, we'll be looking into that. And as I said, you know, the model as it was developed is now 18 months old. And so, you know, part of the modeling activity is to make sure that's updated with most recent kind of in-plan inputs, so that, you know, those kinds of direct and indirect jobs can be most reflective of today's, you know, today's job market. But it is broken down in that way.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, that is great.
So we are at our time, but we have one more item, and this is one that Cynthia, I think you asked to bring back. This was and to talk about, this was a consent item on last month's board meeting. And this is an informational item for us, as was the last one, so there's no action taken, but I think it's important that people are aware that there is this document out there. I think Howard has been patiently waiting for us as we've walked through these things. This is a presentation of the audited financials against the budget. So this is all last year's data. It is not forward-looking as near as I know. So this was just looking at what our budget was for last year and how we did against it with the actual financials.
And we have Jason Bartlett will be presenting, our finance manager.
Okay, Jason, you're going to present to us. Fabulous. Hi. Do we have a
yes.
You just talk, or I guess it's that couple pages, right?
Yes, it's just the 2 pages. One is the memo, and the other is the attachment, which kind of shows the budgeted. So it shows the budget compared to the audited financials. Now, with our financial statements, it doesn't really directly correlate one-to-one with these categories specifically, because financial pro forma statements are of a certain level of standard, whereas a budget is more of a guiding document on how to do that. But not to say there isn't a map, and this is it. And so as we go through, we see that electricity sales were below what we were expecting in June of 2019. And that is primarily due to lower usage overall. It was a kind of moderate year temperature-wise, and we did do some revenue diversion to the rate stabilization fund. And we can also see that lower reduction in revenue with the lower cost item. The first, under current expenditures, we see cost of energy. That was also considerably about the same percentage lower, around 4%, I believe. There's more detail on the slide before that. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yep. Cost of energy was also about 4% below budgeted amounts. Overhead, on the other hand, which is kind of pretty much everything else, that was about 32% under budget. The majority of that, as we can see, is that there were $4 million in local development that we just did not get to spend, but we did roll it over into the current year. So we do have it earmarked and ready to spend for the current fiscal year. Overall, total expenses were 5% below budget, and this led to a net increase position of about 2% above what we were expecting. And that's the highlights. Any questions?
Thank you, Jason. Do we have any comments from the public or questions?
I have Blair Beekman signed up to speak to this item.
Great, thank you. Blair?
Oh, I do not see Blair on the attendees list.
Oh, maybe he dropped off. Okay. Well, if he comes back on for some reason and he still wants to speak, we'll move forward. I see Cynthia's hand and Monica's hand up. So Cynthia, did you have comments?
I didn't. The hand was from the last time,
okay,
but
that's what I was wondering.
But I do want to ask a question. I always have questions.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for bringing this item forward. I just want to be clear, finance is not my main fort here. So did we bring in last year? I know some items were below, and do we bring in additional revenues that were not anticipated last year?
When you say anticipated, are you just referring to anything other than electricity sales?
Well, I guess that's a good question. I guess I'm really looking at the overall budget.
Gotcha. Well, we did get some miscellaneous income due to a grant that we had won for local development, and that was with the Bay Area Air Quality Management Group. And then we did earn interest on money that we held in accounts, and that you see on the chart will be the investment income. But with that and electricity sales, that was all of our revenue.
Okay.
I would also just add to that general comment. It's very difficult to sort of earmark exactly what revenues you project, because there's a lot of variables that change your electricity sales. For example, like you could have less customers than anticipated. In our case, we didn't have any material adjustments to our customer base. In addition to that, the big factor is really weather. So if it's a more mild weather year, your load's going to be lower. And so your revenue may come down, but your expenses come down as well. And so that's a really big factor. So, in this comparison, you can see our actual revenues were a little bit below what we had budgeted, but our expenses were also below what we were budgeted. So the sort of net position still ended up being very strong. And then I would say that, the third factor is Pci Impacts Revenues. And in this case, with the last fiscal year, PCIA didn't kick in. The changes to PCIA didn't kick in January. They kicked in May, just because there was delays from a regulatory perspective for when that change occurred. So things like that really have a pretty material impact, or can have a pretty material impact year to year on revenues. And so, when you ask that question, it's hard to answer directly, not knowing if you're particularly focused on a certain area like customer base or load because of weather or PCI or things like that. But there are a lot of factors that play.
Thank you both for your clarifications.
Thank you, Cynthia. Monica?
Yeah, so I had a couple of questions. First of all, I think it's congratulations for coming under budget by not just a little bit, by a significant amount. And just on your retail sales, I think you mentioned that you saw sales go down because of mild weather, but did you see a significant impact due to COVID-19? And whereabout is your sales number right now in terms of gigawatt hours per year?
Okay, well, so I hear two questions there. One is, what was the effect of COVID on our retail sales? And two, what are our current sales in this year? To answer the first question, primarily the difference that we saw from, or that we're seeing from COVID, is not so much a direct reduction in usage as much as it is a shift in time of use. We're seeing, and within the classes. So where people would normally be at work, they're at home running their air conditioners. So we're seeing a spike in residential usage and a decline in commercial usage. So that's the primary kind of shift that we're seeing due to COVID. Now, with regards to where we're at with our current year, we're pretty much on track with where we have been. We have Q1 financial statements that will be coming out, and I expect will be presented at the next FAT meeting. That will show that we were pretty much on target, even though we had a very hot couple of weeks in August and September that were expensive for us. We did see increase in revenues due to air conditioners in residential areas. So we're still very much on target with our projections from the budget that was passed in June.
So you're still about like 7,500 gigawatt hours a year? that about where you're at?
Total usage. Yeah, we're at about 6 terawatt hours a year, but we're expecting that to increase with the addition of the new communities.
Great. And then just the other big notable thing is how far off you were on your cost of energy. And I'm just curious, and please only share what you can share. Do you guys hedge out your whole commodity supply for your cost to serve load before going into the budget? Or did you have much exposure to the market?
Nick looks like he wants to answer this
share
one.
That? Sensitive information. We can't share that with a fellow market participant.
Oh yeah, but
Monica, look, what I will say is, we have guidelines that are set in our risk management program. And so we don't tend to sort of think about hedging in the context of a budget. We think about hedging in the context of our risk management guidelines, which is predominantly still a time and volume based matrix, right? Like I want to be X% hedged 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And there's a range, and that range is driven by, historic price versus historical. So if it's 60 to 80 and the range within 60 to 80 is going to be driven by the historical price. So we're not thinking about like we're setting a budget based on market conditions. We try to disassociate the two. So we're not trying to chase a budget number in our risk management. Instead, we want to be a very diligent, process-oriented approach to hedging.
Right. Yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe you can share, like $14 million below budget on your cost of energy is quite significant. Is it because you factor in contingencies or something else in your cost of energy, or?
I would just,
go ahead, Howard.
I would also add in, our electricity sales came in close to $8 million below budget. And again, so less load. So of that 14 million, 8 million of it is related to less load. So really energy costs are coming in more like $6 million below budget. And that is any number of factors in terms of, our budget for X, RA, and energy costs. And I would say the most material one is really softer energy prices overall throughout the year. So our hedge matrix, as Nick alluded to, in order to be compliant with we're generally around 80 to 90% hedged going into any particular month. And so we were, fully compliant to our hedge matrix. And so that 10% exposure, given softer energy prices, leads to some of that material reduction.
But you don't add a contingency to your supply costs to cover uncertainty.
No, what we do in a budget perspective is we forecast it, in the June timeframe based off of forward pricing. And we don't just add in cushion there. So, we were forecasting based off of all the various energy products. So that is correct.
Well, great job. It's an accomplishment to come so far under budget.
Great. Thank you all. I don't see any other hands. I want to give my kudos as well. I mean, I think that it shows good management to have the budget and actuals the way we see it. I'm hoping that this type of budget versus actual can show up on the quarterly reports as well, to follow up on kind of what we're doing, noting that it's an unaudited actual. I think that would be helpful to understand kind of where one is in terms of the budget. It's a request. I think I've asked it before, but thank you very much, Jason. So I'm going to move us on to the last item, which let me get to it here, is I believe whether or not I failed to put it on there. It's our typical one. If other members of the CAC or members have anything that they want to make sure is on our next agenda or anything that they want to share.
Just a friendly neighborhood announcement that says COVID rates are going up, folks. There's been a lot of people in my immediate community that have been impacted. We've lost some people. And so it's much easier to get than you think. Please be safe at home. And like take care of each other. And if you're going nuts, feel free to reach out at any point.
Great. Thank you, Anna Olivia. Ernie, I saw your hand, and Monica, if you still want to say something, leave your hand up. If you don't, put your hand down. Ernie? You're on mute, Ernie.
Thank you. I just a quick comment on the Aramis project, which looks good. I know that the Sierra Club and possibly some other groups are going to be recommending that we go ahead and accept that, but we do that with environmental management conditions. And I would say that hopefully we support that. I think that it's going to be on the agenda for Wednesday. I don't think it's going to come to us. So just a note.
No, it's not. Okay. Anything else? Seeing no hands, I will adjourn us to Monday, December 14th at 6 p.m. via Zoom. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.